World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Paris correspondent Erin Zaleski is with us. How are you?
Well, thanks.
Busy week.
Always.
It's always a busy week.
Especially now,
right.
the election.
All right. Some weeks are busier than others, especially here in the French capital. Eleanor Beardsley with National Public Radio, you confirm?
Yes, François, we do not stop.
Okay. Also with us, Dorian Malovic. He's the Asia desk editor at French newspaper La Croix, the co-author of North Korea in 100 Questions, published in French.
Yeah, looking for an English publisher.
All right.
It's basic, non-partisan. It's great.
And it's a great read.
Thank you.
I recommend it highly. Also with us, Judah Grunstein, editor-in-chief of World Politics Review. Where does one find World Politics Review?
Last time I checked, it's at worldpoliticsreview.com, and we also have an iPhone app.
An iPhone app?
Yes.
All right. Okay. The World This Week, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Hashtag World This Week. Historic week, historic day. Call it a watershed moment for South Korea and its democracy. The Supreme Court unanimously ruling to chase President Park Geun-Hye from power.
Today is truly a day that will go down in history.
I remember all the days I've spent out on the streets protesting. I'm really happy about today's ruling. It makes me want to cry.
A bribery scandal involving the president, the daughter of a late cult leader, and bribes allegedly paid by giant conglomerates, exposing the chummy relations between business and politics in South Korea. But Park still had her supporters among hardline nationalists, 2 killed in protests outside the court in favor of the daughter of a former coup leader who she'd seen both her parents assassinated when her father was in power. And Dorian Malovic, that's one of the striking features of this Friday, is that it's been I guess you could call it a conflict of generations, really, over the destitution of Park, with the older generation more on the side of the ousted president.
I mean, the older generation is very much nostalgic about Park Geun-hye's father, the dictator in the 60s, Park Chung-hee. He was the guy and the military guy, and he started the economic growth of South Korea. And the old people, they just nostalgic of that time, everything was fine, they had jobs, and South Korea was really booming, and then there was the small tiger at the time, we called them,
So will this Friday mark
it's another step.
A coming of age for South Korea?
Well, it's another step. I mean, when you remember, you had the 87. It was the
big
end
student
of
protests.
Yes, and the end of dictatorship, and then the beginning of democracy, and you had the Olympics in 88. That was South Korea showing to the world they emerged as a democracy. I was in Seoul in December 9 when the parliament voted for the destitution, and the people were very also crying for joy, because that was the first step. Now we were expecting the court to decide whether they would validate this vote from the parliament. It was unanimous, 8 out of 8 judges.
And earlier this week, you weren't sure it would be unanimous.
I wouldn't make any bet on that.
Why not?
Because you had some judges pretty much a little bit conservative, because they have been nominated by the former president, a conservative guy, Lim Yong-bak, before. So you never know. But the charges, more than 13 charges against the president, were strong enough and heavy enough to vote for the destitution.
Judah Grunstein.
Well, I'd say 2 things, with the caveat that I'm not a Korea expert, so Dorian might have to weigh in. But I'd say that in terms of what drove the sort of popular dynamic that drove her from power was the scandal itself, but also all these things that fed into it in terms of growing inequality, in terms of income in South Korea, the fact that the economy and the economic growth really fed the big conglomerates and the people who were already in a good position, and not necessarily the younger people and others. And then the other thing is the implications, and I think we'll be talking about it a little later, for both the fact that there's been this power vacuum in South Korea at a time when North Korea is being very provocative and very active, as well as the fact that because of the nature of the scandal and because the more conservative hardliners have been in power now for about, 9 years, is very likely to swing toward the opposition, which is a lot more open towards engagement with North Korea at a time where the Trump administration in the U.S. Might not be open to engagement. So it complicates a lot of different things in terms of what's going on in East Asia right now.
Aaron Zaleski?
Yeah, I was more curious about what the replacement, the successor, is going to mean for U.S.-South Korea relations, because it's been an ally of the U.S. for some time, and it almost
It's going to be a quick campaign. We're going to know in 60 days.
And what the implications that will be. It seems like the U.S. influence in South Asia is a bit shaky right now, with the Philippines sort of looking toward Beijing and away from the U.S. And I'm just curious to see how when the dust settles.
All right, let's talk about that. The timing of the campaign to replace Park, adding a layer of uncertainty to a region that's already got more than enough to go around, but with the week beginning with North Korea firing missiles 1,000 kilometers away into the Sea of Japan. Both Pyongyang and Beijing blasting Seoul and Washington over annual joint military exercises and the start of the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system south of the 38th parallel. As Aaron Zaleski was just saying there, people are curious to hear what Washington's going to say about this, and we have heard muted reactions so far out of Washington, yet everyone is saying that this region and this conflict in particular between the two Koreas could be Donald Trump's first big crisis. Of course. Eleanor Beards?
François, this is something, we're in Europe, but it's not, I don't follow Asia closely, but this is always on the back burner. But it is hotting up, and you're seeing these missiles fired, the Korean leader, the Chinese, and this... I was reading about it this morning. This is serious. This could be a war breaking out. Who knows? And yet we don't know what our president will do. And we don't have any idea how he'll handle something like this, because he's a man of, it's like this. It's not like that. We haven't seen very many nuances. This seems like just a tangled knot of geopolitics, diplomacy going back decades, wars, treaties. This is going to be fascinating and even a bit scary.
I think Trump has also, overlooked it. I mean, during the campaign, there was really no mention about North Korea and the potential threat there. The focus was more on the so-called Islamic State, and lately it's been on the possible Russian hacking. So it's been a bit overlooked, and now it can't be ignored anymore.
He did talk about he's going to bang his fist on the table and make China take care of it. But that was about the extent of what he said about it. I think the complication is one that I mentioned previously, that it's possible and possibly even likely that South Korea and Washington won't be on the same page, that the Koreans will want to have a policy more of engagement, while the Trump administration might be a little more firm. There's even talk of them considering a military option. The other thing that's very concerning is that when you look at Trump's foreign policy and national security team, first of all, it's very thinly staffed to begin with. The people that are in place that are supposed to sort of be the grown-ups in the room and sort of guide him into toward a more sustainable policy. I'm thinking of people like the Defense Secretary Mattis, the National Security Advisor McMaster. Their experience is all in the Middle East. The Secretary of State Tillerson, ExxonMobil, focuses more in terms of Russia and the Middle East. There's no one at the upper echelons of that team that has experience in East Asia, that has experience with China, that has experience with managing the alliances in terms of Japan and South Korea. And there are a lot of moving parts that make it very complicated. So it's an extremely complicated situation that the Trump administration doesn't seem to have the mechanics in place for.
We did see something we hadn't seen in the first month on Thursday, which was a State Department briefing. Yeah. But the fact, I won't put this to you, Dorian Malovic, the fact that we haven't heard much from the new U.S. Secretary of State, is that good or bad, or what? How do you...
I mean, that would add to the volatility of the context in Northeast Asia. I mean, we know where the North Koreans stand. We know the South Koreans are in trouble. And the next president can be more left-sided, left-oriented, and more keen to talk with the North. So not so much protected by the U.S. and against the THAAD. actually. The THAAD just arrived, but in pieces.
It's
right?
not operational yet.
No, it's not like a computer you just plug and it starts. You know, you need a few months. But in between for 2 months, you have the campaign. So the president by interim, Huang, is going to push for the THAAD installation very quickly, as quick as possible. But then the silence from the White House and the State Department was really, really concerning. I mean, we didn't know.
We started to see remarks this Friday.
Yeah, but
there's another element, which is that if you look at Trump and if you look at Kim Jong-un, they're kind of mirror images. I mean, there's an asymmetry in terms of how much military power each has. But North Korea has a huge military deterrent, even if it's asymmetric, because Seoul, the capital of South Korea, is within artillery range of North Korean forces, and they have somewhere in the low 1,000 in terms of short-range ballistic missiles. So in any escalation or in any sort of conflict, there's a first wave, even if the outcome is not in doubt. There's a first wave that would be extremely bloody. But just one last thing, the two leaders in terms of North Korea and Washington are unpredictable and hard to read.
I just noticed what the UN ambassador at the UN said 2 days ago. She said, "Was the guy irrational as..."
U.S. ambassador.
U.S. ambassador. What did I say? Oh, sorry. U.S. ambassador to the UN said, "This guy in North Korea is irrational."
Right. He's not irrational, but he's hard to read.
He's totally not irrational. I told you last time, François, it's very scheduled. It's very rational. It's another... We cannot mix sympathy and non-sympathy and irrational. And the question is, I reverse it. Now we don't know if Trump is rational. Now, I think, that makes it, let's look at the other way, you know? And the silence is really a sign, you know? We don't know.
Yeah.
By the way, you might want to spare a thought for South Korea's largest conglomerate, Samsung. The boss faces hard time in jail for bribes. Consumers the world over are reminded every time they get on a plane that their phones explode. And now, thanks to the latest data dump by Wikileaks, we've learned that at least one model of their smart TVs makes a handy spying device for the CIA. Dorian Malevich, are there reactions in South Korea to this story?
I don't know what to say. It's just flabbergasting because you just the connections, you know, with diplomacy, politics, nukes, missiles, and then the CIA way to put malware and Trojan horses and software in the phones and in the TV sets. So it sounds like everything is connected, but now with WikiLeaks, okay, I'm a little bit careful about WikiLeaks. You know, you never know what's behind it, right? But still, it's a bit worrying. I mean, also, you know,
you never know what's behind it. What was your reaction to the story?
My reaction was, well, I read an article today. It said you just need to update to that latest version. So if you've been, putting that off every time you need to do it.
Yes.
But then again, I was wondering, how do you spy on people through their television?
It's a smart television that has a microphone in it. The television itself is connected to the internet. And so the microphone can be activated, but apparently from what I read, it can only be activated in person. In other words, a CIA technician needs to visit your home while you're not there, presumably, in order to implant it. But there's another connection in terms of North Korea, which is that a report came out this week also that the U.S. has been sort of mounting a cyber campaign to sabotage the missile program there. My response to the WikiLeaks story or the leaks about the CIA was, so shockingly, you're telling me that the CIA spies on people? This is what they're supposed to do. This is what we know that they do. There was no evidence or even accusation that they were spying on Americans domestically. Yeah. There was, for instance, in terms of the Snowden leaks, there was the revelation, at the very least, in addition to all the other things about spying abroad, that the NSA was gathering information domestically on Americans. Here, there's no indication that that's the case. It's very clearly not a whistleblower case. It's very only it can be resumed as an attack on the U.S. by WikiLeaks.
And I wasn't surprised at what was revealed at all, just like what Judah was saying. I was more shocked that the information got out at all, which reflects a weakness within the agency. And that's more concerning to me than what was released.
That brings us to the heart of the matter, that the CIA can bypass the encryption and encrypted devices is only part of it. The founder of WikiLeaks particularly alarmed, he says, at the casual manner in which the revelations were passed along by a former operative.
The Central Intelligence Agency lost control of its entire cyber weapons arsenal. This is a historic act of devastating incompetence to have created such an arsenal and stored it all in one place and not secured it.
All right, and for its part, the White House seems to share that concern. Spokesperson Sean Spicer taking aim, it sounds like, take a listen, at his own intelligence services.
There's grave concern that the president has about the release of national security and classified information that threatens and undermines our nation's security. Obviously, he believes that the systems at the CIA are outdated and need to be updated. We are not commenting on the current situation as is U.S. government policy.
Systems at the CIA are outdated and need to be updated.
I'm sure, but this whole thing, François, what it does, it just creates this atmosphere of, it totally undermines, U.S. diplomacy as we're taking the high road, when we're putting sanctions on Russia for having this low-grade war in eastern Ukraine. And here we are, it's leaking what we're doing, so it becomes like, well, there is no right and wrong, and everybody does it. And, we were some journalists...
You get the sense the White House is contributing to that?
Yes. I mean, we're with Marine Le Pen, and we're asking her, the front runner here in the presidential election, is Russia hacking the French election? And she's laughing like, everyone wants to blame Russia, but isn't it the U.S. eavesdropping on its best allies' phone conversations? So it just, there's no right, wrong, truth, untruth. It's just nebulous sphere. It just feeds it.
What was your reaction to what Sean Spicer said, Judah?
Well, to begin with, the CIA just, I think starting 2 years ago, engaged in a radical transformation of its organization and the way it organizes its operations. So it certainly any government agency can use reforms and updating, but I don't think what they have in mind is an update. What they have in mind is really rolling back the CIA, because there's an obvious animosity between the U.S. intelligence community and this administration. In terms of the leaks themselves, it's true that it's startlingly incompetent that the CIA lost control of this arsenal. At the same time, there's a lot of the elements suggest that it was actually an enemy spy campaign that actually, or intelligence campaign that actually exfiltrated this information. It ends 2 years ago, which is about when recently there was something called the shadow brokers, where a group of hackers apparently hacked NSA cyber arms and cyber campaigns and sold them on the internet. And those two ended about 2 years ago, and people sort of concluded that this was a Russian intelligence operation. So I think that Assange is being a little disingenuous in the sense that he's accusing the U.S. of stuff that he's probably either wittingly or unwittingly being manipulated by Russian intelligence or other intelligence to do their bidding. Certainly, all nations engage in spying. That's the nature of statecraft. It has been for quite some time. The question is, with regard to, as an American, in terms of the CIA leaks, were these tools used against American citizens or not? Afterwards, it's a question of policy. Do you agree with American policy? Do you agree with the national security objectives of the U.S.? Their opinions can differ, and certainly do, based on where you sit. But in terms of, as an American, in terms of American law, in terms of whistleblowing, this to me does not qualify as whistleblowing. There's nothing demonstrably wrong in terms of American constitutional rights or law in terms of what the CIA was doing.
All right, Eleanor Beardsley mentioning the French campaign. We'll be talking about it later on. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week.